There is no salvation found outside of the Catholic Church. So what exactly does that mean? Well, clearly, it means that if you are not Catholic, you are automatically going to hell. Well, no, that's actually not what it teaches. However, what it does mean is that Jesus Christ started one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That means he created one church, not this loose collection of believers that have some things theologically in common. He created an authoritative church whose purpose is to continue on his earthly mission. So what exactly is Jesus' earthly mission? Well, it was the forgiveness of sins and the salvation of souls. Now, the church was given actual power to continue on this mission, to continue the mission of salvation of souls and the forgiveness of sins. Now, this was primarily done through the sacraments. The sacraments are the means that God gave us in order to impart sanctifying grace upon the soul. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term sanctifying grace, it means God's very life within your soul. Now, without sanctifying grace, no one can get to heaven. The soul needs to have God's life within it in order to enter heaven. Now, the typical Protestant response that I've personally heard to this is that, no, I don't need your church. No, I don't need your sacraments, because I have Christ alone. Christ alone saves. Now, to a degree, they are correct. Jesus Christ alone is the final judge on who is going to be saved. That being said, Jesus Christ chooses to save through his church. You see, it's not the doctrine of Christ alone that saves. And yes, I've actually heard people say that if you do not believe in the doctrine of Christ alone, if you actually think that you have to actually do something in regards to your salvation, well, then clearly you're not saved. That's a load. I'm sorry. Jesus Christ himself multiple times talks about the things that we, as his followers, need to do. That being said, Jesus has bound his salvation to his church and his sacraments. As such, we are obligated to approach Jesus by the means that he left us. That doesn't mean that we can't pray to Jesus on our own, but it does mean that if we want his gifts of sanctifying grace, we are required to come to him through his sacraments. Now, that's not to say that people outside the church have no hope. As I said before, it does not mean you're automatically going to hell if you're not Catholic. Because while Jesus bound us to the sacraments, he himself is not bound to them. Yes, of course, he's bound to them in the fact that he's going to keep his promises regarding them, but he is not limited by them, and he can save whomever he chooses. A good example of this is the good thief, and he's actually a popular example with Protestants who are trying to refute the power of the sacraments, because as we know, the good thief was not at the Last Supper, so he did not partake of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist, in his body, blood, soul, and divinity. And as far as we know, he was not baptized. But we do know that Jesus told him that on that day, the two of them would be together in paradise. So we do know that the good thief was saved. That doesn't mean that we can essentially just sit back and wait for Jesus to use these extraordinary means for everyone else. Yes, we can have hope for everybody outside the church, but that is not where the promise is. The promise is within the church. That is what Jesus Christ established as the ordinary means of salvation. And people have the right to know this. And we have an obligation, just as we have an obligation to approach him through the sacraments, we have an obligation also to preach the truth about his church. The people outside the church, they're the lost sheep. And we can take comfort in knowing that we have a good shepherd who is going to go out of his way to find those lost sheep. We know we have a good shepherd that can and does use extraordinary means to save them, but we also know that the ultimate objective of the good shepherd, is to bring the lost sheep back to the flock, and the flock is his church. Now, our evangelization efforts are not just for our Protestant friends. They're for our Catholic brothers and sisters as well. Because while there is hope for those outside the church, being within the church is not an automatic guarantee of salvation. God will expect more from you if you're Catholic. To those who are given much, much is expected. And nobody has received more than Catholics, because they have received the fullness of truth and the gifts of God's holy sacraments. And as such, we need to get out of our comfort zones, and we need to preach the truth, and we need to bring people back into the faith. Anyway, thanks for listening. God bless.